I call again for their immediate and unconditional release. Since 7 October, relentless Israeli bombardment and hostilities have killed tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, including many women and children. Countless others have been injured, maimed, and traumatized for life. The speed and scale of the killing and destruction in Gaza are unlike anything in my years as Secretary General. Nothing can also justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Over the past year, virtually the entire population of Gaza has been displaced, many of them several times, with nowhere safe to go. Half of the homeless are children. All are surviving in appalling conditions with very limited access to food, water, sanitation, shelter, and health care. All are in constant fear for their lives. In face of this destruction, international humanitarian law is in tatters. And let's be clear, violations by one side cannot be used to justify violations by the other. The humanitarian system is hanging by a thread. 226 of our own colleagues have been killed, many with their families. I call for investigation and accountability for these killings. At the same time, violence continues in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Some 700 Palestinians and 14 Israelis have been killed since 7 October, the highest number on both sides in more than 2 decades. The construction of new settlements, land grabs, demolitions, and settler violence all continue. The advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice found that Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful, and Israel has an obligation to end it as rapidly as possible. The General Assembly demanded that Israel should comply. Meanwhile, the Israeli authorities continue to limit and prevent the international media from reporting from the occupied Palestinian territory. International media outlets are the eyes and ears of the world. Journalists must be able to do their jobs everywhere. Mr. President, shock waves radiating from the unprecedented death and destruction in Gaza now threaten to push the entire region into the abyss, a full-scale conflagration with unimaginable consequences. Monday was the bloodiest day in Lebanon since 2006. Today, Israeli Defense Forces struck civilian buildings in Beirut, saying they had targeted Hezbollah's main headquarters located under Nice. War in Lebanon could lead to further escalation involving outside powers. I fully support the proposal for a temporary ceasefire, allowing for the delivery of humanitarian relief and paving the way for the resumption of serious negotiations for a durable peace across the blue line. We need this ceasefire now. We cannot afford endless negotiations as we have on Gaza. We must avoid a regional war at all costs. Gaza remains the epicenter of the violence, and Gaza is key to ending it. Mr. President, Gaza is the most dangerous place in the world for the delivery of humanitarian assistance. But our colleagues continue to do their utmost to fulfill their humanitarian mission. The recent polio vaccination campaign shows what humanitarian agencies can do when they are allowed to carry out their vital work. But crossing points into Gaza remain restricted or inaccessible, roads are damaged and littered with unexploded ordnance, essential items, including shelter kits and protective equipment, are prohibited, and so far this month, almost half of coordinated humanitarian movements in Gaza were denied access or otherwise impeded by the Israeli authorities. 87% of movements between north and south were denied or impeded. Instead of scaling up humanitarian operations, we see a scaling up of attacks and harassment against humanitarian personnel. On 28 August, Israeli forces opened fire on a clearly marked World Food Programme armored vehicle that was part of a convoy that had been coordinated with the Israeli military authorities. 10 bullets hit the windows of the vehicle. Stopped at Al-Rashid checkpoint on its way to support the polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza. Soldiers pointed their weapons directly at the convoy personnel. The clearly marked UN vehicles were encircled by Israeli forces and live shots were fired. The convoy was approached by 2 Israeli tanks and a bulldozer. The rear tank rammed UN vehicles from the back, compacting the convoy with 12 humanitarian workers inside. The bulldozer dropped debris on the first vehicle, while soldiers threatened UN and NGO personnel inside. Actions like these create significant risks to UN and other humanitarian personnel. Attacks on humanitarians are an unacceptable assault on the values of the United Nations and must stop. Meanwhile, the indispensable work of UNRWA cannot be undermined by attacks against its people and mandate and by administrative obstacles. I urge the Israeli authorities to do everything in their power to end attacks on UN personnel and property, to stop spreading disinformation against UN officials and entities, and to speed up the approval of visas and procurement requests. All parties must abide by their obligations to protect humanitarian personnel and ensure that civilian sites are not used for military purposes. Mr. President, the United Nations will continue to support all efforts towards sustainable peace, starting with an end to the violence. The death spiral must end for Gaza, for the people of Palestine and Israel, for the region, and for the world. International humanitarian law must be respected. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected. Aid must flow freely and safely, and there must finally be accountability. The key to peace in the region is a political solution. All hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally, and the international community must mobilize for an immediate ceasefire and the beginning of an irreversible process towards the end of the occupation and the creation of a Palestinian state. I urge the Council to unite in support of an immediate ceasefire leading to a viable two-state solution. That is the only way to end this cycle of tragedy, and I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his briefing. And now I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mohammed Mustafa, Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Observer State of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. President. اسمح لي في البداية
At the outset,
أن أتقدم منكم
allow me
ولوفد سلوفينيا
to
بصفتكم رئيس مجلس الأمن لهذا
thank
الشهر
you, Mr. President, and thank
وافر
Slovenia,
الشكر
the
والتقدير
President of the Security Council, for
هذا
this
الاجتماع
month.
الوزاري الهام
We express our
حول القضية
gratitude for
الفلسطينية.
holding this important
وأود
ministerial
أن أغتنم
meeting
هذه الفرصة
on the Palestinian cause.
لأتقدم
I
لكم
take this
بالتهنئة على
opportunity
حسن
to
قيادتكم
congratulate you
لمجلس الأمن
on
خلال
assuming
فترة
the
توليكم الرئاسة
presidency
خاصة
of the Security
في
Council
هذا
in
الوقت
this
الدقيق.
able manner, especially
لقد
at
شهدنا
this
من
delicate
سلوفينيا
time.
مواقف مشرفة
Slovenia has had
الوقوف إلى جانب
honorable
القانون
positions.
الدولي
You stood
والحقوق التي
beside
يكفلها هذا
international law
القانون
and the rights
ولكم منا
guaranteed by
كل
this law.
الاحترام
We
والثناء.
express all our gratitude
كما
and our
أود أيضا
respect to you.
أن أتقدم بالشكر والتقدير
We would also like to
للأمين العام
express
للأمم
our
المتحدة
thanks and appreciation to the
على
Secretary
قيادته
General
الحكيمة
of the United Nations
لمنظمتنا
for his wise
التي
leadership
تتعرض لهجوم
of this
وحملات
organization
تشهير
that has been the
غير
victim
مسبوقة
of attacks
على يد
and
إسرائيل.
defamation, unprecedented
نجد امتنانا
defamation
لكم
by Israel.
نجدد امتنانا
We
لكم
renew
على
our
شجاعتكم
gratitude towards
وحرصكم
you for your
على
courage,
الحفاظ على مصداقية
for
هذه
maintaining
المنظمة
the
وفاعلية
credibility of
عملها
this organization
والاستمرار في
and the
تقديم العون
effectiveness
والإغاثة
of its work
وحشد الدعم
for
لرفع
continuing to
المعاناة
provide
عن شعبنا
assistance,
الفلسطيني
for mobilizing
رغم
support
تكلفكم
to alleviate the
عناء
suffering of
هذه
the
المهمة
Palestinian people.
والمسؤولية ورغم فقدانكم لزملائكم
Although you
في قطاع
yourselves
غزة
have lost
الذين هم
colleagues
إخوتنا
in the Gaza Strip,
وأخواتنا ورغم استهداف
colleagues that
إسرائيل
are
للأمم
our own
المتحدة
brothers and
ومقارها
sisters.
وأماكن
And although
اللواء
Israel targeted the
وموظفيها
United Nations,
خاصة وكالة الأونروا
its
لكم
facilities,
منا
its
كل
shelters,
التحية
its
والاحترام
employees, especially
والدعم.
UNRWA, we
السيد
salute you
الرئيس
and we salute your
أصحاب
sacrifice.
السمو والمعالي
Mr. President,
والسعادة
Your
لقد
Excellencies,
مضى عام كامل على العدوان
a
الإسرائيلي
whole year
على
has
شعبنا
passed
في قطاع
since the
غزة
beginning
المحاصر
of the Israeli
والمدمر
aggression against our people in the Gaza Strip.
360
The
يوما
Gaza
وليلة
Strip that has been destroyed
الرعب
and sieged,
والقتل
365
والنزوح
days and nights of
والدمار
terror, of killing,
والمرض
of displacement,
والألم
of destruction,
والجوع
of disease,
والقهر
of pain, of
واليأس
hunger, of
والحزن
despair, of
والحاجة
sadness, of
والحرمان
need, of deprivation.
وفوق هذا التجريد
And on top
وفوق هذا وذاك
of all of that,
التجريد من الإنسانية
they've dehumanized
والكرامة.
us and they took away our dignity.
لقد بدأ عام على
A
تعنت
year has
الحكومة
passed
الإسرائيلية
on the
ولقد مضى عام
intransigence
أيضا
of the Israeli
على
government. A
الازدواجية
year has
اللا
passed
إنسانية
for
للمعايير
the inhumane
المجلس.
double standards in this
والتي
council.
تركت أطفالنا
Double
ونساؤنا
standards that have left
وشيوخنا
our
ورجالنا
children, our women, our
وأطباؤنا
elderly, our
وصحفيين
doctors, our journalists,
ومعلمينا
our teachers,
وطواقمنا دون حماية
our humanitarian
وعون.
workers, without any
وكأنهم
protection,
ليسوا من البشر.
without any support, as if they were not even
السيد الرئيس
human beings.
لقد أتينا إلى الأمم المتحدة
Mr. President, we
ولمسنا
came
التضامن
to the
الكبير
United Nations
مع
and
شعبنا
we felt
وقضيته العادلة
solidarity, great solidarity
ولكننا
with our
نغادرها
people and our
والمجازر
just
الإسرائيلية
cause. But we
لم
leave the
تتوقف
United
بعد.
Nations and we see that the Israeli massacres
ومجلس الأمن
have not
لم
ended.
يلجم
And the
حتى
Security
الآن
Council, to this
العدوان
very
الإسرائيلي
day, did
ولم
not put an end to
يقر
the Israeli
الإجراءات التي
aggression,
من شأنها
did not adopt
كبح جماح
measures
الحكومة الإسرائيلية
that would
التي ترى في الحرب والعدوان
put pressure to bear on the
استراتيجية
Israeli
سياسية
government
للبقاء في
to put an
الحكم.
end to this war, to this
فبعد أن
aggression.
دمرت كل غزة
They've
بالكامل
destroyed Gaza
واجتاحت مدن الضفة
completely.
الغربية ونكلت
They've
في شعبنا
invaded
الفلسطيني الأعزل
cities in the West
نراها
Bank.
اليوم تفتح نيرانها على الشعب
They've
اللبناني
attacked
الشقيق
unarmed Palestinian citizens,
وتستبيح
and
سيادة
today
لبنان
we see them firing on the
في
Lebanese
خرق
people.
صارخ
They're
لميثاق
violating
الأمم
the sovereignty
المتحدة
of
والقوانين
Lebanon,
الدولية
blatantly violating
تتصرف
the UN
كدولة خارجة
Charter
عن
and
القانون
international law. They are
لأنها
acting as a
مقتنعة
rogue state
بأنها دولة
because
فوق
they are
القانون
convinced that they are above the
يحق
law
لها ما لا يحق
and
لغيرها
they are entitled to things that other
وكيف لا
countries are
تكرر
not
إسرائيل
entitled
المشهد
to.
العدواني
So
في
how would they
لبنان
not repeat the
طالما أنها
same
لم
aggression in
تعاقب على
Lebanon
جرائمها في
if they were not
فلسطين
held accountable for their crimes in
ولم
Palestine
يفرض عليها الانصياع
and that they were
كالمطالب
not
بوقف إطلاق النار
forced
في غزة
to comply
ووقف سياسة
with the
العدوان
ceasefire in
وردع
Gaza,
إرهاب المستوطنين في
with
الضفة
putting an
الغربية
end to the
بما فيها
aggression,
القدس
with putting an end to the terror
السيد الرئيس
from
إن
settlers in the
إسرائيل
West Bank,
مستمرة
including
في
East
مخططها
Jerusalem.
العدواني
Israel
حتى تجر
continues with
المنطقة
its
بكاملها
aggression
نحو
so
حرب
that it
مفتوح.
pushes the entire region
هل
towards an
سيستمر مجلس
open
الأمن
war?
في
Will
موقفه
the Security
التقليدي
Council
الذي ينتهي
continue
بالتنديد
with its
والمطالبة
traditional position where you
متوقعا من
call
إسرائيل
for
الامتثال؟
Israel to put an end to the
متى
war and expect
ستفعلون
Israel to
أدواتكم هنا
comply?
في
When
مجلس
will you
الأمن
activate your
التي
tools
تجبر
at the Security
إسرائيل
Council
على
that will
الامتثال
compel
لصون
Israel
وحفظ
to
الأمن
comply,
والسلم
to
الدوليين؟
maintain international peace
إلى
and
متى
security?
سيكون الفصل السابع
Till
محرما
when
على
will
إسرائيل؟
you
هل تنتظرون
refrain
كارثة
from using
أكبر من
Chapter
ذلك؟
7 on Israel?
هل
Are you
تنتظرون
waiting for a
حربا
bigger
أوسع من
catastrophe?
ذلك؟
Are you waiting for a larger
نحن
war?
ندين استهداف المدنيين
We condemn
كافة
attacking
وعلى السواء
citizens
مهما كان عرقهم أو
regardless
جنسيتهم
of their
أو دينهم
nationality, their
فلا
religion,
يوجد
their
مبرر
background.
يسمح
There is
أو
no
يعطي أحدا
justification that gives
ترخيصا
anyone
لاستهداف
the
المدنيين
right to
وإيقاع
target
الأذى بهم.
civilians and to harm
السيد
civilians.
الرئيس أصحاب السمو
Mr.
والمعالي
President,
والسعادة
Your Excellencies,
لعل ما يمكن استخلاصه
maybe
فيما يخص
what we
القضية
can conclude
الفلسطينية
when it
خلال
comes to
هذا
the
الأسبوع
Palestinian cause during
من
this week
الوقت الذي قضيناه في الأمم المتحدة
at the United
هو أن
Nations
قادة
is
العالم
that
من مختلف
leaders
بقاع
of the
الأرض
world
يرون أنه من
from different
اللامنطقي
countries,
بل من
they
الجنون
see that it is
أن نستمر على
unreasonable,
نفس
it is
النهج
insane
الذي اعتدنا
to
عليه في
maintain the
الماضي
same approach that we
لمواجهة
have
التحديات
adopted in the
المهولة
past
التي
to
نقف أمامها
confront the
اليوم
great challenges before
والتي
us
تمنعنا
today
من تحقيق
that
السلام
prevent
العادل
us from
والشامل
achieving a just,
والدائم
comprehensive and
ما
lasting
يعني
peace.
أيضا أنه من
This
غير
also
الممكن
means
الاكتفاء
it is
فقط
not
بالتعبير
possible to
والانضمام إلى
simply
الموقف الدولي
express
الثابت
and
بشأن
join
التسوية
the
السلمية
constant
للقضية
international
الفلسطينية ثم
position
ترك
on
الأمور
the
إلى أن
peaceful
يأتي الوقت
settlement of the
الذي
Palestinian
تصبح
cause, and
هذه
then leave
الأطراف
things
جاهزة
up
للتفاوض من
until
أجل
the moment
التوصل
when
إلى حل
all
عادل
parties are ready
وسلمي
to reach
فلا
this
يمكن
just,
الآن
peaceful
تجاهل
and
الحقيقة أن
comprehensive
هناك
solution.
طرف
We cannot ignore
لا
the fact
يريد
that there is a
التفاوض
party that does not wish to
ولكنه
negotiate,
من يملك الوقت
even
كله
though this party has all the time in
ويفرض
the world,
الحقائق غير
is
الشرعية
imposing
على الأرض
illegitimate facts
وفق
on the
أجندته
ground.
السياسية
They have their own
والداخلية
internal political
والاستعمارية
agenda,
المنافية
a
للقانون
colonial
الدولي
agenda
وميثاق
that
الأمم
violates
المتحدة
international law and the UN
وهناك
Charter,
طرف يسابق الزمن
while the other
يفقد في
party
كل
is
يوم
racing against
ما
time,
هو أغلى
and every day
وأثمن
is losing
وما لا
everything
يمكن
that
تعويضه
is near and dear,
واستعادته
something that we
كما لا
cannot
يمكن بعد اليوم
compensate, that we cannot
التصديق
get
بأن إدارة
back.
الصراع
We cannot
بدلا
really
من
believe
إنهائه
after
هي
today
استراتيجية
that
مجدية
managing the
تصل
conflict
بنا
instead of
إلى
ending
الأمن
the conflict
والاستقرار
is a good
إن
strategy
المواقف
that will
الدولية
lead to
الثابتة
security and
بشأن
stability.
التسوية السلمية للقضية الفلسطينية
Constant
هي
international
مواقف
positions
ضرورية
on the
وهامة
peaceful
جدا
settlement of the
وقد
Palestinian
سعينا
cause.
معكم
These are
بشكل
necessary
جماعي
and important
للتوصل
positions,
إليها
and we
على
have
مر
worked with
العقود
you so that we can
لتصبح
reach this
مرجعيات
peaceful
دولية
settlement for
متفق
so
عليها
that we can go
وتستند
back
إلى
to the
القانون الدولي
internationally
وقرارات
agreed
الشرعية
upon terms of
الدولية
references, so
ولكننا
that we can
نقف
rely on
الآن
international law
أمام
and the
تحديات
resolutions of
عظيمة
international
ومنعطف
legitimacy. But
تاريخي
today we are
لم
before
تعد
great
هذه
challenges.
المواقف
We are
وحدها
before a
كافية
turning point, and
وأصبح من
these
الملح
positions
أن
alone are
تتكاتف
not
الجهود
enough. We
لاتخاذ
need
إجراءات
concerted
عملية
efforts to take
تجعل من
practical
إنهاء
measures
الاحتلال
that
وتنفيذ حل
make the
الدولتين على
end of
حدود
the occupation and
1967
achieving the two-state
حقيقة
solution along
وتمارس
the borders
على
of
الأرض
1967
الواقعية لا
to
يمكن
make sure that
إبطالها
this is a
أو
reality
التراجع
on the
عنها
ground.
ولا يمكن الإبقاء
It is
عليها كمجرد
irreversible.
رؤية
It
سياسية
cannot
أو
remain
أمنية دولية.
as a political
السيد
vision.
الرئيس مع ظهور جيل فلسطيني جديد
Mr. President,
تتعمد
we have a new
إسرائيل سلطة
Palestinian
الاحتلال غير
generation,
الشرعي
and
تدمير
Israel, the
فلسطين
occupying power,
ثم
is
نعيد
seeking
بناؤها
to destroy
ثم تدمرها
Palestine.
مرة
We
أخرى
rebuild again,
ونعيد
they destroy
بناؤها
again. We
مرة
rebuild again,
أخرى ثم
and
تدمر
they
مرة
destroy
أخرى
again.
لقد مررنا بمحن
We
ومآس
have
شتى
witnessed
ونهض
many
شعبنا
tragedies,
بعد كل
and
محنة
our people
ململما
managed
جراحه
to stand up
حاملا
once again
ألمه
after each
وحافظا أمله
tragedy,
مصمما على الحياة
holding on
مستحقا
to their
لدعمكم
hope, holding
وتضامنكم
on to
ومؤازرتكم ومساندتكم
relying on
التي
your
تقدمونها
support, on your
في كل مرة
solidarity, and on
آلة
your help.
البناء والتطوير
Every
الفلسطينية
time
تقابل
the
بآلة
destruction
التدمير والهدم
machine
الإسرائيلية
of
نحن وأنتم
Israel
نبني
is
وإسرائيل
faced with the
تدمر
development machine of
نبني
Palestine.
المدرسة والإنسان
Israel destroys
وإسرائيل
and we
تهدم
rebuild.
المدرسة
Israel
وتهدم الإنسان
destroys schools
نريد إعادة
and
بناء
human beings,
فلسطين
and we rebuild
بشكل
these schools,
يضمن ألا تتعرض
and we
للتدمير مرة
rebuild
أخرى
Palestine, and we
ولا
need to
يجبر
rebuild it
شعبنا
in
على
a way that,
النزوح
makes
قسرا
sure that it is
مرة
not
أخرى
destroyed again,
وألا يقف على
so that
أبوابكم
our people are
مكلوما
not displaced
مرة
once again,
أخرى
so that they do not
نريد أن نعيد بناء
stand by your
فلسطين
doors
ونحن على يقين
facing
بأن
calamity once
الطريق
again. We
الذي
want to
ينتظرها
rebuild
هو
Palestine
الطريق الذي
while we are
يقودها
sure
نحو
that
الأمام
the path
نحو
we are
الازدهار
taking is
يعيش
the
شعبنا
path
فيها
towards the
بكرامة
future
كدولة ذات
prosperity
سيادة
where our
بين
people
الدول
can live in
وكأمة
dignity
حرة
as a sovereign
بين الأمم
state among
نريد
nations.
الانعتاق من الاحتلال
We
الإسرائيلي
want to
غير
break
القانوني
free from the
وفق
illegal
فتوى
Israeli
محكمة
occupation
العدل
according
الدولية
to the
دون أي
advisory
تأخير
opinion of the
نريد دولتنا
ICJ without any
المستقلة
delay. We
وعاصمتها
want
القدس
our
الشرقية
independent state
حرة
with East
ذات
Jerusalem as
سيادة
its
نريد
capital,
لشعبنا أن
a
يعيش
free
على أرضه
sovereign. We want our
ينعم
people
فيها
to live on
بالحرية
their land
والكرامة
where they
كما
are
يكفل له
enjoying freedom and
وحق
dignity
المشروع في تقرير
according
المصير
to their
دون أي
legitimate
تأجيل
right to
فنحن لدينا
self-determination without
المكونات
delay.
اللازمة
We have the
لدينا
right
التاريخ
components. We have the
والإرث
history,
والحضارة
the
لدينا
culture,
التجربة
the civilization, the
والكفاءة
experience,
ولدينا
the
القدرة
capability,
والإرادة
and the
والأهم من
will.
ذلك
And most
لدينا
importantly, we
الإنسان
have
الفلسطيني
the Palestinian
المثابر
people that
والقادر
is
هو
resistant.
ذخيرتنا وموردنا
They are
الذي
our
لا
human
ينضب.
resources.
اسمح لي سيد الرئيس
Allow me,
أن
Mr. President,
ألقي بقية كلمتي باللغة
to
الإنجليزية
continue in
حتى
English
أوضح بعض
so
أوضحها
so that
بشكل
I
واضح.
can clarify some
Mr.
of my
President,
messages.
we came here with a simple message. No complicity and no complacency. No bias and no double standards. No excuses and no self-inflicted powerlessness. The rule of international law for the benefit of all. No country above the law. No people denied the protection of the law. No weapons to kill us. No trade with settlements and their associated regime to rob up our land and resources. Hold Israel accountable rather than shield it while it continues committing its crimes. Israel has a plan. It's not hiding it. Get rid of the Palestinian people and grab their land. We need an international plan with the necessary measures to change the reality on the ground. Our call is clear. 1, recognize the state of Palestine and support its membership to the United Nations. Number 2, implement the ICJ advisory opinion and the General Assembly resolution endorsing it and demanding an end to the Israeli unlawful presence in the entirety of the occupied Palestinian territory within 12 months. Number 3, join the global alliance unveiled yesterday to end the occupation and achieve the independence of the state of Palestine and implement the two-state solution. Number 4, support our national plan, Build Palestine, including to build our economy and consolidate our institutions. End impunity and the Israeli occupation will end. End the Israeli occupation and we will achieve shared peace and security. A free Palestine is the sole key that can unlock a peaceful future for our region and unleash its potential. Everything else has been tried and failed, and the cost of this failure is measured in human lives, all too often in Palestinian lives. A different future is possible. It starts with the decisions each state will make today. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Mustafa, for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we cannot overlook Hezbollah's recent actions. Since October 8, Hezbollah has launched over 9,000 rockets, more than 1,000 anti-tank missiles, and hundreds of explosive UAVs at Israeli civilians. While we are interested in a diplomatic solution, we will take all necessary measures to ensure the safe return of the 70,000 internal refugees to their homes. It is time to hold Iran and its proxy accountable and take decisive action. Esteemed colleagues, this is now our 5th meeting in the span of just 12 days. How long will we repeat these debates? It is time for this Council to break free from this gridlock and regain a semblance of productivity. We sit here today just 10 days from 1-year commemoration of the October 7th massacre, a day forever etched in the hearts of every Israeli. Over 1,200 innocent lives were brutally taken in a single day. People were torn from their homes, bound and burned alive in their final moments. More than 100 hostages remain in Hamas's grasp, enduring unimaginable cruelty. Recently, the bodies of 6 hostages were found brutally murdered just before rescue. The conditions they endured, starvation, suffocation, and deprivation, is a testimony to Hamas's cruelty. This must be a wake-up call to the international community. Condemn Hamas and demand the immediate release of all hostages. That moment was the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. It was a defining moment, not just for us, our leaders and people, but also for the Palestinian people and leadership. That moment of October 7th. They stood at a crossroads and were faced with a choice: to stand with humanity and peace, or align with barbarism and terror. In that crucial moment, after we got the news of the attack, the Palestinian Authority failed, exposing their lack of will, desire, and ability to be true partner for peace. Their failure has deepened doubt among many Israelis about the possibility of a peaceful future. Prime Minister Mustafa left, but I plan to ask him, how can you stay silent? How can you, as a proud representative of your people, remain speechless in the face of such barbarity? Why do you refuse to condemn Hamas and their atrocities? I listened very carefully to what he said. Never once he mentioned Hamas. Yesterday I listened to President Abbas in the General Assembly. Never once mentioned Hamas. The PA was presented with a clear opportunity to distinguish itself from Hamas and their brutality. But once again, they wasted it. They could have presented themselves to the world as a moderate, reasonable body seeking a peaceful future. However, the Palestinian Authority has no interest in that future. The late Abba Eben's word still ring true. He was Israeli PR here many years ago. And he said, and I quote, "The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity." Instead of standing for peace, the PA used international diplomacy to shield Hamas. We saw it in the General Assembly. We see it every day here. Instead of confronting Hamas, the PA protected them. Unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority's failing ran even deeper. Not only have they failed to condemn terror, but they have encouraged it through words and policy. Through the vile policy of pay to slay, the PA has turned the murder of innocents into a profitable enterprise. Terrorists are rewarded and their families compensated. The PA has transformed innocent Israeli blood into a form of sick currency. This is not just a betrayal of Israelis. It is a betrayal of the Palestinian people whose future is being sold off for violence. And I want to ask the distinguished minister and the Prime Minister, your government's collaboration in this violence has prolonged the conflict you claim to want to resolve. You shelter terrorists rather than condemn them. And we speak about Gaza and about the future of Gaza. And how do you expect to be part of a functional and cooperative future for Gaza when you cannot even maintain control over the areas you govern now? Look at the cities in Judea and Samaria, like Jenin and Tulkarem, which are just short rides from Ramallah, the center of the Palestinian Authority. You know as well as I do that Mr. Mustafa and Mr. Abbas and maybe Mr. Mansour, they cannot enter these areas, not anymore. They cannot go to Jenin, to Tulkarem. Your security forces refuse to confront the radical armed terrorists who are quickly seizing control. You have given over these cities and many more into the ruling hands of terrorist monsters. How can you expect to govern Gaza when you have allowed terrorist strongholds to flourish in your backyard? The international community must ask itself, how can the PA possibly be trusted with Gaza's future? Let me be clear. Israel will not stand by as terror spreads. There will be no safe haven for terrorists in Judea and Samaria or Gaza. The IDF is operating wherever necessary, focusing on areas like North Samaria, from where terrorists launch many of their attacks. Everyone here must remember, these operations would not be necessary if the Palestinian Authority met their obligations. They are both incapable and unwilling to do so. Instead of rooting out terrorism, they allow it to fester, leaving Israel no choice but to act. And that's what we do. And we have a mission to eliminate terror wherever it arises, in Beirut, in Jenin, in Gaza, and we will not stop until our citizens are safe. Distinguished colleagues, while Israel fights a war it did not seek, We have made every effort to protect Gaza's civilian population. Despite relentless attacks, we have ensured that humanitarian aid continues to flow. Well over 1 million tons of aid have entered the Strip via over 50,000 trucks. Of the more than 1 million tons of aid, over 800,000 tons have been food. We stand ready to continue to facilitate the entry of aid, and we will continue to go above and beyond our international obligations, even as Hamas continues to embed itself among civilians. These are not actions of a nation seeking destruction. As the Palestinian Authority and their allies would have you believe, and you're going to hear many ministers today, these are the actions of a nation that values life, fighting an enemy that worships death above all else. Yet the PA remains silent on these facts, choosing instead to distort reality to further their political agenda. It is time for the international community to regain its moral clarity. And you know, we see it all over, around the world. We see a clear divide between those who seek peace and those who thrive on chaos and violence. Do not waver. Do not hesitate. There is a distinction between good and evil. In each of your countries, you face radical forces, criminals, extremists, and law-abiding citizens who simply want to live in peace. The question we must ask ourselves today is this: which path is the Palestinian Authority choosing? They have to decide. They want to follow Hamas or to be something else. The PA must be forced to condemn terrorism, to renounce Hamas, and to change the radical positions that fuel this cycle of violence. They must realize there is no future in terrorism and that peace requires courage, not weakness. But whether or not the international community finds the strength to act, Israel will not waver. We will continue to defend our people, protect our borders, and uphold the values of peace and justice. Our resolve is unbreakable, our mission is clear, and we will prevail.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovenia. I want to start by thanking the Secretary General for his briefing and recognize a number of high-level participants at this meeting. Excellencies, after this week's debate on leadership for peace, I'm convinced that making a daily choice for peace is also a sign of courage. To ensure peace in the region, we must make tangible and bold steps to protect the two-state solution. I'm not talking about an empty slogan. We need courage from leaders in the region and from this Council to change the trajectory we are facing. Facts on the ground are making the prospects for a two-state solution almost non-existent. Firstly, I agree we can no longer stand idle. Every single leader must contribute. It has been almost a year of the war in Gaza, a year of hostages kept in the tunnels, a year which brought suffering, killing, and this is in addition to decades of suffering, killing, and destruction of the entire occupied Palestinian territory. Many of us around the table have stepped up our efforts to ensure humanitarian assistance and contribution to different organizations, provided glimpses of humanity to the people in Gaza, including UNRWA. Merely humanitarian efforts are not enough. We need concrete political signs. Slovenia recognized State of Palestine this June, and I call on the others to do the same. The recognition of Palestine is an extremely important political sign and a message of encouragement for the Palestinians in their struggle for statehood. We must support initiatives empowering the Palestinian Authority government to take control over the entire Palestinian state and regain trust of the Palestinian people. Secondly, we must work together. This Council has adopted numerous resolutions on this conflict, including 4 on this war. ICJ has been clear in its provisional measures and its latest advisory opinion. Occupation must end. Practices and policies such as illegal settlements, settler violence, and human rights violations must end. This Council must be united and adamantly clear in its call for immediate implementation of its resolutions and decisions of ICJ. There should be no double standards and selectivity. If only one of us is not protected by the international law, none of us can no longer rely on it. Thirdly, we must act to prevent peace in the region slipping away. We can no longer express our concern about the potential regional spillover. However, the spiral of violence has gradually become more complex. This week, and in the last days, we have seen an enormous escalation in Lebanon. Attacks must cease. We call for restraint of all actors and respect of international law. The Council must clearly respond to this threat to international peace and security. We cannot let another Gaza happen. Lebanon is a further sign that we urgently Gaza happen. Lebanon is a further sign that we urgently need to deliver on the ceasefire deal. Fourth, we must not forget about the West Bank and East Jerusalem. As the world focuses on Gaza, the situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem has reached a boiling point. Israeli dehumanization of Palestinians has reached a new height. The number of Palestinian children in the West Bank alone who have been killed by Israeli forces nearly tripled in a year. Death toll in the West Bank since October 7 is the highest last 15 years. There is a dramatic increase in the intensity of settlement expansion, which involves numerous, cannot be in the form of hatred, escalation, provocation, occupation, or terrorism. Standing for peace is through normalization of ties, negotiation in good faith, equality, and respect for international law. Only a just solution of 2 states, Israel and Palestine, side by side in peace and security, can turn a new page for the security and prosperity of the region. And what is this Council doing? Definitely not enough. I have therefore instructed our ambassador to the Security Council, to the United Nations, to start consultations on a possible new humanitarian resolution on Palestine. Thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Wang Yi, member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, colleagues, China welcomes the convening of a high-level meeting on the Middle East, initiated by Arab countries. Under current circumstances, this meeting is highly relevant and necessary. I thank Prime Minister Gallop for chairing today's meeting. We all listened carefully to the briefing of Mr. Secretary General and commend the efforts of Mr. Secretary General and the UN to mediate the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and promote peace in the Middle East. Mr. President, this round of Palestinian-Israeli conflict has lasted more than 300 days. The humanitarian crisis is unprecedented, and the tragedies of war are horrific. The people in Gaza are suffering under bombardment and blockade, and from hunger and disease. More than 40,000 civilians have lost their lives, and millions are displaced. Women and children are the first to suffer. Meanwhile, from Lebanon to Syria, from Yemen to Iran, spillovers of the crisis continue to spread. Regional hotspots are intertwined, the intensity spiral upward, and the situation in the Middle East is worrying. When the Middle East is unstable, the world is insecure. Faced with current difficulties and challenges, the international community cannot just look on, and the Security Council cannot sit idly by. China proposes 4 points. First, war and conflict must not continue. A comprehensive ceasefire must be achieved immediately. One more day of war means more civilian casualties and broken families. One more region where conflict spreads means more spillovers of crisis and hatred. We must act with the greatest sense of urgency to promote lasting ceasefire and comprehensive withdrawal of troops in Gaza. The parties to the conflict must fully implement the resolutions of the Security Council and make the decision of ceasefire, and not to take any adventurous moves that aggravate the tensions. Countries with important influence over the parties concerned should also take a sincere and responsible approach and play a more constructive role promoting a ceasefire and effectively managing and preventing the spillover of crisis. The Lebanon-Israeli situation is worrying. The sovereignty of Lebanon should be upheld, and the people of Lebanon's safety should be protected. China opposes all moves to abuse, force, and aggravate tensions in the region. We condemn all actions that harm innocent civilians. We urge the relevant parties to take immediate action to prevent further escalation of the situation and more casualties from being created. Second, we must not deviate from letting the Palestinian people govern Palestine. We must work together for post-war governance. Gaza used to be where diverse civilizations met, but today it is engulfed in fighting. We must stick to the principles of Palestinians governing Palestine, Palestinian-led and Palestinian-owned, and take a coordinated approach on post-war governance of Gaza. We should encourage all factions of Palestine to implement the Beijing Declaration on ending division and strengthening Palestinian national unity, support the Palestinian National Authority in boosting its authority and governance capacity, and achieving effective jurisdiction over all territories of Palestine, and support the conduct of specific governance affairs with the Palestinian people at the center. China calls for holding a meeting on post-war reconstruction and calls on the international community, countries in the region, and regional organizations to take an active part. Third, justice must not be absent. We must revive the two-state solution as soon as possible. Last week, the emergency special session of the General Assembly adopted with overwhelming majority the first resolution introduced by Palestine, demanding implementation of the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice and ending the illegal occupation of Palestinian territory by Israel. This is of historical significance. The resolution of the UN should not just be a sheet of paper, and the dream of the Palestinian people to build their own country or state cannot be negated. China urges relevant parties to immediately and comprehensively implement the resolution and to fulfill due international obligations. The Security Council should support Palestine in becoming a full member of the UN and to make new efforts for the two-state solution. China supports holding an international peace conference of larger scale, more authority, and more effectiveness, implementing a timetable and roadmap on the two-state solution in order to finally achieve the peaceful coexistence of the two countries of Palestine and Israel and harmony between the two peoples of Arabs and Jews. Fourth, international support must not be absent. We should uphold the peace and stability of the Middle East. The Middle East used to be a highland of civilization in the past. It should not become a low point of peace today. The international community should, on the basis of supporting the will of Middle East countries, support them in using their wisdom to settle hotspot issues in the region. Under the premise of mutual respect, fairness, and justice, we should work to create a security architecture that fits the history and reality of the Middle East and accommodates the legitimate concerns of all parties. We should support UN peacekeeping operations in the region in effectively fulfilling their mandate to promote de-escalation and peace and development. The international community should step up humanitarian assistance and ensure the effective access of humanitarian supplies, support the UN or UNRWA in playing its important role. Countries yet to resume funding for UNRWA should resume funding as soon as possible. We should help countries in the Middle East, especially those affected by the conflict, to achieve sustainable development and cement the foundation for lasting peace. We should firmly oppose external pressure and interference and help the Middle East get rid of the shadows of conflict and confrontation. Mr. President, China is a strategic partner of the Middle East countries. We have always been a builder of peace, a promoter of stability, and a contributor to development in the Middle East. China never interferes in the internal affairs of Middle East countries, never draws spheres of influence in the region, and never fish selfish geopolitical gains using hotspot issues. What we do is for restoring peace and stability in the Middle East, to help the countries achieve stability and prosperity and deliver a happy life to the people there. War is a test of human conscience and justice, and peace requires the wisdom and determination of all countries. China stands ready to work with Arab and Muslim countries and all peace-loving countries that advocate justice to work for an early ceasefire, prevent spillover of the conflict, implement a two-state solution, and promote peace in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Wang for his statement. Now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Attaf, Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad of Algeria.
شكرا لكم السيد الرئيس
على
استجابتكم الكريمة لطلبنا بعقد هذا الاجتماع، والشكر موصول كذلك للسيد الأمين العام أنطونيو غوتيريش على إحاطته الدقيقة والمعبرة حول الملف الذي يشغلنا اليوم. لقد بادر وفد بلادي بطلب تنظيم اجتماعنا هذا لتسليط الضوء مرة أخرى على المسؤولية الملقاة على عاتق مجلس الأمن تجاه ما تشهده غزة من إبادة جماعية متواصلة منذ ما يقرب العام كاملا، وتجاه ما تشهده منطقة الشرق الأوسط راهنا من تصعيد إسرائيلي خطير
This dangerous Israeli escalation that portends an all-out regional war that could blow the peace and security and stability of everyone. This is a legal, political, moral, and human responsibility shouldered by our Council. It's a responsibility
وبقية شعوب ودول المنطقة، وإنها أيضا مسؤولية راسخة لمجلسنا لا تقبل التبرير لعدم الالتزام بها تحت أي ظرف من الظروف، ولا تقبل التملص منها تحت أي ذريعة من الذرائع، وإنها أخيرا مسؤولية ثابتة لمجلسنا لا تتقاضى ولا تسقط في ظل العجز الذي أصاب الهيئة المركزية هذه وشل من قدرتها على الاهتداء إلى سبل إنصاف الشعب الفلسطيني وإحقاق حقوقه. لقد التأم مجلسنا هذا عشرات المرات منذ بدء العدوان الإسرائيلي الغاشم على غزة، وقد أسفرت هذه الاجتماعات بعد طول مداولاتها وتعسر مفاوضاتها
and
إلى اعتماد
unsuccessful
قرارين
and
وحيدين
negotiations, such meetings
يطالبان
only adopted
بوقف
2
إطلاق النار
resolutions calling
في
for a
هذه
ceasefire
الأرض
in this
الفلسطينية الجريحة،
hurt
وهما
Palestinian territory.
القراران اللذان
Those
لم
2
يعر لهما الاحتلال
resolutions were
الإسرائيلي
disregarded
الاستيطاني
by
أي اعتبار
the settler Israeli
ولا أدنى
occupation.
تقدير
They never
ولا أقل
respected them
احترام، بل على العكس من
or
ذلك
appreciated
تماما
them.
راح يمعن في
contrary,
جرائمه الشنعاء
They continued their
وانتهاكاته
heinous
الصارخة
crimes, their gross
وممارساته
violations,
اللا
and
إنسانية
their inhumane
دون أن يلقى
practices
أي ردع حاسم
without
أو
any
أي
firm
إدانة
deterrence,
صريحة أو حتى
clear
أبسط لوم
condemnation,
أو
or
انتقاد
even just to blame
من لدن
or
مجلسنا
criticism
هذا.
by our council.
وها نحن نقف اليوم
Here we are today,
على التداعيات الكارثية
taking stock of such
الناتجة عن
catastrophic
إطلاق العنان
repercussions due
للاحتلال
to
الإسرائيلي
granting the Israeli occupation free
والتساهل
hand
مع ممارساته الإجرامية
and being so
وصرف الأنظار
lenient
عن
with their
مخططاته
criminal
التوسعية
practices, which just
والتدميرية
turned a blind eye to
وتخريبية.
their subversive,
فبعد أن
destructive,
كنا
and expansionist schemes.
نرقب تطورات حرب الإبادة في النطاق المحدود لقطاع غزة.
At the beginning, we were
أصبحنا
just
لا ندري
observing the developments of a
نوجه
genocide within
المرحلة
Gaza.
الراهنة
However,
بين
now
امتداد هذه الحرب
we see an expansion of such a war to
وبين
the West
التصعيد
Bank,
الإسرائيلي في
in
المنطقة
addition to an
بأكملها
Israeli escalation
من
in the
اليمن
entire
إلى
region,
سوريا
going
إلى
from
إيران
Yemen to Syria to
وصولا
Iran
إلى
and
لبنان
reaching
أين
Lebanon,
ارتفعت جرائم الاحتلال
where the
منازل
crimes of the
ودرجات.
occupation have even
وبالفعل
escalated
فإن ما
by
تم
stages.
اقترافه من جرائم في
What
غزة
has been
منذ عام
committed in Gaza
وفي لبنان
throughout that
راهنة
year and recently
يصعب
in
نعته
Lebanon
دبلوماسيا
cannot be
أو سياسيا
described
أو
diplomatically,
قانونيا،
politically, or legally.
فهمجية هذه الجرائم وصلت
Those
إلى حدود
crimes
ما هو لا
were
حضاري
so barbaric
ولا أخلاقي.
that they are uncivilized, immoral, and inhumane.
لقد أقام مجلس الأمن
The Security Council
الدنيا
moved heaven and
وأقعدها
earth in
في مواقف سابقة
previous situations
لا ترقى أن
that
تشكل
cannot even
قطرة
constitute a
من
drop
بحر
in an
الانتهاكات
ocean
الإسرائيلية
of the Israeli
بكافة
violations
الأعراف
of all
والمواثيق
international
الدولية.
norms and conventions.
ولقد لجأ مجلسنا هذا
Our
إلى الفصل
council
السابع
has
من
resorted
الميثاق
to Chapter
لفرض
7
الحظر
of the Charter
والعقوبات
to impose bans and
في حالات
sanctions
أقل
in
بكثير
situations
مما يحدث في غزة
that were
وفي لبنان وفي
not
سائر الجوار الفلسطيني
as hard
فداحة وخطورة
or dangerous
وجسامة. ولقد كان
as is
مجلسنا
the
هذا
case in Gaza or
وراء
Lebanon
تحريك
or in
الهيئات
the neighboring
القضائية
countries of
الدولية
Palestine. Our
وتأديبها
council
في مواضع لا
has
تقارن
actually
البتة
moved different
مع
international
هول
judicial
وهمجية ما
organs
شهدناه ولا نزال نشهده
to take
من
action
جرائم
on
الاحتلال
situations
الإسرائيلي.
that are not even as close
إننا
as the barbaric
وإذ نستعرض
scenes we have
تجارب
witnessed due to the
المجلس
crimes of the Israeli
السابقة
occupation
في التعامل الحازم
the
والصارم
areas mentioned above.
مع عدم احترام قراراته الملزمة.
We
نجد
review the
أنفسنا أمام
experiences
جملة
of the council in the
من
past and
التساؤلات
how
التي
they
تطرح
have
نفسها بكل
taken
إصرار
certain stances and addressed
إلى متى؟
with
إلى
determination
متى يبقى
the
الاحتلال
situation where
الإسرائيلي
its
الاستيطاني
binding resolutions were not respected.
يحظى بنظام
However, that
خاص
matter
من
begs certain
اللامساءلة
questions. For instance,
ولا
until
محاسبة
when will we
ولا
continue
معاقبة
seeing this settler
نظام
Israeli occupation going without
ينطبق
any
عليه
accountability or
دون سواه.
punishment? Why does it have
إلى متى؟
one system that is
إلى
only
متى
applicable
يبقى هذا
to the
الاحتلال
Israeli occupation?
محرر اليدين
Till when will we give free
ومطلق
hand
السراح
to this occupation? Till
يمعن
when we will
في
let it
الإجرام
be free to
مثل ما
continue
يشاء ويدوس الشرعية الدولية أينما
flouting
شاء
international legitimacy wherever
ويعبث
they want,
بأمن
trampling
واستقرار
upon the
المنطقة
peace and
كيفما شاء
security of the region as they
دون
wish,
أن يتحمل
without
أو يحمل تبعات
shouldering
أفعاله
the responsibility
وعواقب
of
ممارساته.
such acts
وإلى
and
متى؟
actions, and without
إلى متى
us
يبقى هذا
making them
الاحتلال
carry that
يتمادى
responsibility?
في طغيانه
Until when this
وتسلطه
occupation will continue with
وكأنه
this
يملك
tyranny
بيديه
and despotism,
مصير
as if
ومستقبل
they have
الفلسطينيين
a free hand in the
بل
destiny
مصير
and future of
ومستقبل
Palestinians.
المنطقة
It's
برمتها
even the destiny and
دون أن
future
يتم
of the entire
وضع
region.
حد
It's
برمتها
even the destiny and
دون أن
future
يتم
of the entire
وضع
region
حد لهذا
without
التجبر
putting any
ولهذا
end
الغرور.
to such arrogance.
إننا نعتقد جازمين
We firmly
ومخلصين
and sincerely
أن الإبقاء
believe
على وضع كهذا يعني
that
الرهان على
keeping
الأسوأ،
the status quo is a
الرهان
real
على
bad bet.
تشجيع
It's betting
وترسيخ
on encouraging
هيمنة
the
المحتل
hegemony of the
والرهان
occupier,
على تكريس واقع
betting on
الاحتلال
perpetuating
والتوسع
the fact of
بالقوة
the occupation and the
والرهان
forceful
على تعبيد
expansion of the
الطريق
occupation,
واسعا
betting on paving the
أمام
way
المخطط
for
الإسرائيلي
the Israeli schemes
الذي
that will
سيدفع لا محالة
undoubtedly push
بالفلسطينيين
the Palestinians
وبجميع دول المنطقة
and all the countries
نحو
of the
مصير
region
لا يصعب
towards
البتة التنبؤ
a destiny that
بمآلاته
is easily predictable,
وتداعياته
for we know full
الكارثية
well
على
its
الجميع.
catastrophic repercussions
إن
on everyone.
خطورة هذه التطورات لا تدع أي مجال
The
لتماطل
dangerous
أو تقاعس
developments
مجلسنا هذا في
that we
العمل
have witnessed
على إعلاء
leave no
المسؤولية
room
الملقاة
for
على عاتقه
procrastination or inaction from our council. We
فالفلسطينيون
have to shoulder our
ومعهم
responsibility.
اللبنانيون
Palestinians,
وكافة دول وشعوب المنطقة لا
the
يطلبون
Lebanese, and all
المستحيل
the peoples and
أو
countries
المحال.
of the region
إنهم
are not
يطلبون
calling for the impossible. They
تحرك
are merely
مجلسنا هذا لوقف ما
asking our
يطالهم
council
من
to
تقتيل
act to put an end
وتنكيل
to the killing,
وخراب
torture,
وتدمير
and destruction.
وإنهم يطلبون
They are just
تحرك مجلسنا
calling
هذا
for our
بفرض
council
احترام
to
ما
act,
اعتمده
to
من
calling
مجلسنا هذا
for our
بفرض
council to
احترام ما
act
اعتمده
to
من
ensure
قرارات ملزمة
respect for its binding
وإنهم
resolutions.
يطلبون تحرك
They're merely
مجلسنا هذا
asking
لتغليب ما
our
يقره
council to
القانون
act
الدولي
to
من
prioritize
قواعد وضوابط
the rules,
وأحكام
regulations,
يتساوى
and laws,
الجميع قواعد وضوابط
the rules,
وأحكام
regulations,
يتساوى
and laws
الجميع
of the international
في
law
واجب احترامها
that we must all be
والامتثال
equal
والاحتكام
in
إليها
respecting and complying.
وقناعتنا تبقى
We
راسخة
strongly believe
من أن تمادي الاحتلال
that
الإسرائيلي
the
في إجهازه على القضية
persistent
الفلسطينية
trampling
يزيد
of
هذه
the
القضية
Israeli occupation
إلا
on the
توهجا
Palestinian question will
وبروزا
only fuel this question.
كأعدل قضية
It
على
will
وجه
make it the
المعمورة
most just cause
ولن
on
يزيد
earth.
الفلسطيني
It would only
إلا عزما
make the
وإصرارا
Palestinian
على
people more
استرجاع
adamant
حقوقه
and
الوطنية
determined to
المسلوبة
regain
ولن
their
يزيد
full
المجموعة
national rights. It
الدولية
would only
إلا إيمانا
enhance the
بأحقية وحتمية
faith and
إقامة
certainty of the
الدولة
international
الفلسطينية
community
المستقلة والسيدة
the
كحل
right
عادل
and
كحل
necessity
دائم
for Palestinian
كحل نهائي
statehood. It's a
للصراع
just,
العربي
lasting and
الإسرائيلي
final solution to the
وكشرط
Arab-Israeli
لا غنى
conflict. It's
عنه
an
لاستعادة
imperative and
الأمن
indispensable condition
والاستقرار
to bring
في
about
منطقة الشرق الأوسط
security and
قاطبة
stability in the
وشكرا
entire
سيادة
Middle East
الرئيس.
region. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Attaf for his statement. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Guyana.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Secretary General, colleague foreign ministers, permanent representatives, all. Mr. President, I thank you for convening this meeting and express my thanks to the delegation of Algeria for initiating the discussion on the ongoing situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. I also thank the Secretary General for his briefing. Mr. President, in a few days, it will be 1 year since the Hamas attack on Israel and war of retaliation on Gaza. This is another year added to the many decades of violence since 1948. Recently, however, there have been some extremely worrying dynamics. I will highlight 3 of them so that we can sense of what they mean for the prospects of achieving a permanent solution, the rule of international law, and the legitimacy of the United Nations, including this Council. First, the systemic compromising of the humanitarian response. It is characterized by reduced access into Gaza, restrictions on the entry of life-saving necessities, non-functioning deconfliction mechanisms, targeted attacks on humanitarian personnel, including those of the United Nations, as well as targeted attacks on civilian infrastructure, including schools and hospitals. Second is the attempt to control the narrative about war, deliberately putting out false and misleading information about what is happening in Gaza, or attempting to muzzle those who are vocal about the atrocities taking place. We have heard, for example, that there is no challenge regarding the supply of humanitarian assistance to Gaza, except the United Nations' inability to handle the flood of aid. We have also seen the killings of journalists, even in instances where they were wearing clearly marked press vests. Just over the weekend, we saw the forceful closure of one media outfit in the West Bank. The misinformation campaign against UNRWA and its unproven accusations cost the agency dearly at the beginning of this year. Though a substantial amount of funding has been restored, significant voluntary contributions are still being withheld. The move by the Israeli Kesnet, hope I got it right, to designate the agency as a terrorist organization is another dangerous element of the misinformation campaign. The third element, and perhaps the most worrying, is the blatant and seemingly entrenched disregard for international law by the occupying power that characterizes not just this war, but the Israeli-Palestinian conflict more generally. This disregard is made even more dangerous by the accompanying lack of accountability, creating a situation of impunity. This is the principal reason for the protracted and stalled situation regarding the Palestinian question, and the reason that no solution seems imminent. Mr. President, I conclude with 3 appeals. 1, we need an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages and illegally detained Palestinians, and an end to the campaign of violence in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. We also need a de-escalation of tensions across the region and for all parties, including Israel, to cease their provocative actions. 2, we need concerted international efforts in support of the well-being of the Palestinian people, both in the immediate and long term. This must include action by the Security Council to end the war in Gaza and the heightened violence in the West Bank. It has gone for too long, far too long, and we must take decisive steps to end it and to secure peace in the region. And thirdly, We need to end this war and make progress towards achieving a two-state solution. We cannot allow Israel to continue dismantling the two-state solution. Guyana is committed to doing its part on all of these fronts. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Todt for his statement. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Manuel Gonçalves, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Mozambique.
Mr. President, Mozambique commends the Slovenian presidency for convening this important briefing on current situation in occupied Palestinian territories. We thank Algeria for requesting this timely briefing. We also thank the Secretary General for his important statement on the alarming situation in the Middle East. Mr. President, the situation in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories remain critical. We have witnessed a significant escalation in violent and militarized operations, causing a higher number of casualties, extensive destruction of immeasurable civil infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, and shelters. The expansion of settlements has also intensified, leading to forced displacement and illegitimate property demolitions. This deeply deplorable situation is further exacerbating tension and undermining any prospect for peace. It is imperative to emphasize that Israel's settlements in occupied Palestinian territories are illegal, unacceptable, and blatant violation of international law. The International Court of Justice has underscored that these settlements and the associated police amount to de facto annexation and systematic discrimination against Palestinians. We urge the government of Israel to hold accountable any individuals and entities responsible for violence against civilians in the West Bank. Mr. President, given the grave situation prevailing in Gaza Strip and the West Bank, we reiterate our call for immediate ceasefire, release of hostages and all other captive, safe and conditional humanitarian access, ensuring that aid reaches those in need without restriction. It is crucial for the international community and the Security Council in particular to continue to pursue diplomatic solutions, especially as the regional spillover becomes an unfortunate reality in the Middle East. Mr. President, we commend the completion of the first round of a polio vaccination campaign in Gaza. These achievements exemplifies the collaboration and dedication of all parties involved, including the World Health Organization. We urge all parties to show the same spirit of cooperation and guide the facilitation of second round of vaccination planned for October and any other humanitarian assistance. Ensuring that the children receive this vital vaccination is crucial for their health and well-being, especially in the region facing such challenging circumstances. Mr. President, in the light of current crisis in the occupied Palestinian territories, including Gaza Strip in particular, We are of view that this Security Council must take the following set of urgent actions. 1, call for direct dialogue between the parties. 2, influence the parties to de-escalation. 3, halt the regional expansion of the conflict. 4, ensure scrupulously respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights. Mozambique extended its appreciation and encouragement to UN members, humanitarian workers, regional organizations for their tireless contribution to peace and security in the Gaza Strip. We reiterate our consistent and unwavering commitment to the vision of a two-state solution where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, as full members of the United Nations, coexist peacefully and securely within recognized borders consistent with international law and the relevant United Nations resolutions. Mozambique further stresses the importance of unifying the Gaza Strip with the West Gaza and the Palestinian Authority. Thank you so much, President. And the Palestinian Authority. Thank you so much, President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gonzalez for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sergei Lavrov, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished ministers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we thank the Secretary General for his assessment of the situation in the Middle East with a focus on the unprecedented level of confrontation on the occupied Palestinian territory and on the Lebanon-Israeli border area. This is a conflict which is also having consequences in other parts of the region, with fallout being felt in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Oman. The vast area of the Middle East and North Africa continue to have hotbeds of instability persisting. The spiraling violence has gone far beyond the area of the Arab-Israeli confrontation, destabilizing the situation not just in the above-mentioned regions, but also in the Mediterranean Sea, the Persian Gulf, and in North Africa as a whole. The root cause of these crises has been and remains the fact that the Palestinian issue remains unresolved. At the epicenter of the current confrontation, there is the Gaza Strip, where what